Did you know that Christmas is pagan? Well, it is, and in fact, it's actually more pagan than it is Christian. So if you want to annoy your Christian friends, keep on watching, watch all the way to the end, click that like button, subscribe, ding that bell, turn on the notifications, and let's crack on with the video. I think first of all we'd better start out with the Christmas tree. Now the Christmas tree is a symbol of Christmas. Everybody knows it. But where did it originally come from? Trust me, they never had Douglas firs or even Christmas trees in Bethlehem, and certainly not in Nazareth. But it's actually more of a Nordic tradition, more of a European tradition in fact, and it was brought over from Germany by Prince Albert when he married Queen Victoria in the UK. So that's kind of how it proliferated and how it spread across Europe. But where did it actually originate from? And yes, the Christmas tree, you may have guessed by the title of this video and the content of this video, Christmas trees are pagan. They're a natural force that contains within it the spirits of nature. And the whole idea is that if you cut down a tree and you bring it inside your house, you need to appease the spirits that are in that tree, the wood sprites in particular. Now, wood sprites are potentially benevolent, but they're fairies, so they're not necessarily always going to be on your side. They need some sort of offering. This is where the tinsel and the trimmings came in, because originally they weren't just to make the tree look nice, it was to appease the woodland spirits. When it comes to the spirits themselves and the evil spirits, that's where they hung witch balls on the trees. Now witch balls are big, shiny, reflective balls, a bit like a bauble. That's not a coincidence. They started out as witch balls in order to capture the evil spirits in the tree. When it comes to tinsel, that's kind of the same thing. It's in order to make it look nice, of course, but it's also to appease those woodland spirits. Why do you think you leave gifts underneath the Christmas tree? It's not for each other, it's for the woodland spirits. At least that's where it originated from. In terms of leaving out the mince pie or the cookies and cream for Santa, that's where that came from too. Making an offer to that jolly old elf. In the poem The Night Before Christmas, Santa himself is described as that jolly old elf. That's not a coincidence either. What about the fairy lights? Well, the fairy lights were literally that. Fairy lights. Where do you think the term fairy lights came from? They're not called fairy lights because they're cute. They're called fairy lights because they were indicative of fairies. They were there to represent the fairies. They were there to encourage fairies in. In a similar way to in the garden, you might put out a garden gnome in order to encourage gnomes. You see, fairies like images of themselves. Now, if you can't make a fairy, the easy way of doing it would be to put candles in the tree. Now, obviously that's a fire hazard. But when fairy lights were invented, people bought strings and strings and strings of them because then you can put them on the tree and yes, of course, they look cute, they look pretty, but they also indicate fairies. So if you don't really know why you're doing these things, it's because they're pagan. You may have heard the song, Wassail, wassail, all over the town, our toast it is white, our ale it is brown. What is wassailing? Well, it's a really interesting history, I think, because it's all about blessing the apple trees so that the apple trees can produce more over the coming year. They can harvest more when it comes to harvesting. And the best way of doing that is to bless the apple tree prior to even creating those apples so that the apple tree can then produce a bountiful harvest. So how do you actually do this? How do you bless it? And why is it suddenly part of the Christmas tradition when originally it was pagan? Well, the reason it was pagan is because blessing the tree involved a sacrifice. So generally you'd have wassail cake. You'd also have bread that you would hang in the branches of the apple tree. Moreover, you'd also have cider from the fermented apples from last year's harvest that you would then pour on the roots of the apple tree in a sort of weird vegetarian cannibalism in order to make that tree drunk and merry. And you'd also consume a fair amount of this stuff yourself, by the way. You'd then sing a blessing, O wassail tree, we hail thee, and you'd entreat the tree itself to produce a bountiful harvest the following year. You'd normally have a virginal young girl, who would be the wassail maiden, who would then bless the tree on your behalf. She would be saying this poem to the trees in the orchard. You'd go round each and every tree, you'd say the same thing to every single one of them. and you'd probably be quite cold by the end of it, which is why they'd build a massive bonfire, get everyone round, and it was kind of like, if you're in the UK, Guy Fawkes Night. It's kind of got the same sort of vibe. If you're in America, it's sort of like Halloween, in the same sort of vibe, but it doesn't have the ghostly and scary connotations of Halloween. So in terms of wassailing, that's definitely a pagan tradition that's been picked up for Christmas. So there we have it, a bit of facts about Christmas and how it's pagan. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, click that like button, it always really helps me out. I'll see you again next time, but until then...
Magickal.